Welcome everyone to the Sandy Bob Show. Today we are going to have a very, very interesting discussion regarding ancient times, Orion, reptilians, free will, and religion. Those are the main topics that I'm going to be talking about today. and the show will only be an hour long today. So I got a lot to cover. And I want to start today by painting a picture of planet Earth. Now, you can read in the history books that there was, you pull out the Bible and it talks about the history. There were giants living in the old times, and we know from archaeology that there were dinosaurs roaming the earth, and you have all these coal mines around the planet where they've dug up coal, and they say, whether I doubt if it's true or not, but they say that was caused by dead dinosaurs and dead trees and that sort of thing. So anyway, I'm going to start talking about the history or ancient Earth. The Earth was covered with trees that extended 15 to 20,000 feet tall, and they were miles across their base, and the oceans contained monsters of the deep that were just huge in size, and there's a lot of history and a lot of lore about all this. So I want to start by quoting a few sources, and I'll start with this one. Later Jewish sources describe Leviathan as a dragon who lives over the over the sources of the deep, and who, along with the male land monster Behemoth, will be served up to the righteous at the end time. Well, that may be true or may not be true. And the book of Enoch, chapter 67 through 9, describes Leviathan as a female monster dwelling in the watery abyss as Tiamat, while Behemoth is a male monster living in the desert of Dunedin, east of Eden. And when the Leviathan is hungry, reports Rabbi Dimi in the name of Rabbi Yohanan, he sends forth from his mouth a heat so great as to make all the waters of the deep boil, and if he would put his head into paradise, no living creature could endure the odor of him. His abode is the Mediterranean Sea, and the waters of Jordan fall into his mouth. In the legend recorded in the Midrash, called Perki de Rabbi Eliezer, it is stated that the fish which swallowed Jonah, that's another biblical story, narrowly avoided being eaten by the Leviathan, which eats one whale each day. There's a reference in Amos, Old Testament, chapter 2, verse 9, where the Lord makes a quote. He said, "Yet I destroyed the Amorites before the Israelites, though they were tall as the cedars and strong as the oaks. I destroyed their fruit above and their roots below." Now this sounds pretty fantastic, I mean, we people read that and say, well, that's a fairy tale. It's symbolic, mythical, and has no basis of reality. And I always wondered about that stuff. It must have been an interesting time in the history of the earth if those things really existed. Another quotes, I'll just summarize some of them. It talks about the cedars of Lebanon, and if you read the Old Testament and other places, writings, it said the cedars of Lebanon were so huge that all the birds of the heavens lived in their branches, and the mountains lived under the shadow of the cedar trees. All right, that's another expression of what was going on this planet. So we have these these huge trees that are thousands of feet high that make even our 300-foot sequoia trees and California trees look like bushes. The redwoods of Northern California, and just make them just kind of look like bushes in comparison. Well, anyway, I'm one day I'm doing just browsing on the internet and YouTube, and I came across a YouTube that was done by Mr. MRB333, and you can look this up, and it's still there. And this guy, I didn't even get his name because he didn't really say who he was, but the quote on YouTube says, "Man finds huge cedar tree," and so I watched this video, and what this Mr. RB333 had a friend that sent him a video that he found on Google Earth. And what they found was over in the eastern Mediterranean on an island, they found what was what you would call the stump of a tree. And from ground level, you would never even know it. But from the satellite view, this stump what looked just like a tree stump. It had tree rings and all the characteristics of a tree that was cut off flat, just like you might cut down a 3-foot diameter oak tree in your backyard. It had the tree rings and all that. Excuse me. So upon further investigation, he went in and measured it, and this trunk root that was cut off measured on Google Earth. It measured 7 miles in diameter. Just across the base of this trunk was 7 miles. And the question was, well, it sure looks like a trunk. How could it possibly be? Well, it turns out that right where this tree, this huge cedar tree, was apparently cut down or felled, that all the branches and the tree trunks were still laying on top of the ground, clearly visible by satellite. And so you could see all the outlines of the branches, and you could see all the leaves in the ground. And using the tools of Google Earth, he was able to measure this thing, and the leaves on this tree were the size of the Empire State Building. One leaf was 900 feet long. Just incredible. And I mean, it was enough to knock your socks off. How could this possibly be? And so it started giving credibility to these ancient writings. And then other people picked up on his work, and they started looking around, and they found that there's these tree trunks that have been leveled. They're just cut off flat as a pancake right across the top, are all across the planet, everywhere. And it turns out not only are they cut, they're cut down in a lot of areas, like out west in Utah and Wyoming, Montana, and the United States. They actually created small mountains just from the size of the trees that fell. All these ravines, mountain ravines are just nothing other than the branches caused by these felled trees. That's how huge it was. And it's just unbelievable. I mean, it's astonishing. It belies belief, but it's all true. And so further investigators have made the connection that all the mesas across Montana and Monument Valley out west, where John Wayne filmed all his movies in Monument Valley, that all these mesas are nothing but these tall cedars that have been cut down. And so it adds a lot of credibility to all this. And then other people have gone down to South America and have shown that just all across South America, Patagonia, and all those areas. I mean, these are absolutely huge. Well, this is all fine and dandy, and then comes in Roger from Mud Fossil University. Now, Roger is really a neat guy. You got to go listen to him. Mud Fossil University. If you look up Mud Fossil University on YouTube, you'll get right to a lot of the things that he's done, and he's taken everything to a higher degree than anybody's ever thought about before. And he says, hold on a second. You know, not all these mesas are fallen trees. And he goes on, for example, to show that, for example, the Devil's Tower that's located out in Wyoming, it was the main feature of the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. He goes on to show that that is not a tree stump. It is a giant's leg that broke off at the bottom of the Achilles tendon. It's a foot. It's a footprint. I mean, it's part of a foot. And then he goes on to show that what happened is we had all these giants living at that time, and just as I read a minute ago, and I'll go back to it, the quote, "Yet I destroyed the Amorites before them, though they were as tall as the cedars and as strong as the oaks." Well, you had these group of giants that were as tall as the cedars. And the cedars were like 15, 20, 25,000 feet high. And so we had all these giants out there that were maybe 1 or 2 miles in height and maybe more. And one thing that Roger from Mud Fossil University did, he went out to Wyoming, and he says all the anatomy of a human giant's foot is in that Devil's Tower. It is not a tree that's cut off because it has all the ligaments and tendons and it is the perfect anatomy of a foot. And then he goes on and he's discovered that these giants are all over the earth, but nobody's recognized them. They're laying on the ground everywhere, and some are they're in they've turned to petrified rock, which is it's kind of amazing. A lot of these rock quarries where you see the ancients were digging out these big 300-ton rocks and everything. Those are the giants that have petrified into a form of granite stone. And down in Peru, a lot of the walls and buildings that they built down there, they were using the bodies of these dead giants to build these walls using the petrified stone from these beings. I mean, it just belies belief, but the evidence is there. It's all there. Another one that Roger, he went over to Stonehenge, and he found that those monuments in Stonehenge are all body parts. And there's one rock at Stonehenge that's called the heel stone, and he says that's the actual, real, petrified heel of one of these giants. And then Roger went out west, and he went out to Utah, and there's a famous monument. There's a huge arch that's over 60 feet across, and you can walk under it and take pictures, and it's just huge. And Roger has shown that that is the heart of one of these giants. And they're everywhere. Down in Southern California, where they have a tennis tournament out in the desert, and they also have a golf tournament every spring out there in the desert. As they're walking around on, I think it was the 8th or 9th fairway, as they were showing the golfers, and they were standing at the green with the cameras and looking toward the or standing at the tee-off point and looking toward the green. You could actually see one of these giants. You could actually see the features of his face, his arms, his chest, and everybody thinks, well, that's just a 300 or 400 or 500 foot foothill, but actually it was a petrified giant laying right where he fell. You could see all the features. And Now, other people have taken up on this, and you can go on YouTube and you can look at all these. They're all over. You have huge elephants, you have huge turtles. The colossal Rhodes was one of the giants, that was real famous in history. These giants were real beings that really existed and then turned into petrified rock. So, now let me take another look at things. Satellite views now show, and you could not see this before the advent of satellite, but you can go on Google Earth, or you can actually see it on Google Maps. Anybody that can't afford to pay for Google Earth, just go onto Google Maps and put in the Eye of the Sahara over in North Africa, up by Morocco. And the Eye of the Sahara is a replica of the city of Atlantis. Apparently, back in the time of Atlantis, they built a city that met all the descriptions of what Plato and Solon and all those guys wrote about Atlantis before it sank under the ocean. But apparently, from satellite view, there's about 2 or 3 replicas of Atlantis that are actually visible from satellite, and just in the area of Morocco from satellite. And if you go on to Roger's mud fossil, or go on to YouTube and watch Roger's presentation, he shows that there is a dragon still laying on the ground across North Africa that extends for over 200 miles, and he was attacking a huge fish that was over 100 miles across. And it's laying there right out in the Sahara Desert. And upon further inspection, you can see that the Sahara Desert used to be what I would call the Sahara Ocean, because this fish was in a body of water. I mean, fish don't swim around the desert; they swim around oceans. So there was an ocean there, and the evidence is clear that some sort of catastrophe happened that caused that Sahara Ocean to drain off to the west. And you can see the path where the water just poured out like a deluge, and it drained the Sahara Ocean, and it became the Sahara Desert. It's very clear. I mean, there's just absolutely no doubt in your mind that this happened. And some people are saying that fish and the dragon and Rogers, the scales are still there. I mean, it's still in decaying form, so it had to be in very recent geological times. The scales are very evident, and on this dragon, and it had a fluted tail, so they know it was a female dragon, which exactly fits the written descriptions in the Chinese records of what these dragons actually look like. So a lot of this stuff that I'm talking about, all this destruction is, all these big, tall cedars got cut down. You got all these things that happened probably, we know that Atlantis sank around 11,600 years ago, and we think that the Sahara Ocean got drained at about the same geologic time that Atlantis went down. So, and that's just within the last 12,000 years. So the question is, well, what happened? What in the world caused all these disasters to come to pass on the planet Earth? Well, this is where I say, enter the renegade group of reptilians from the star system Orion.